line we have Kevin Doyle. Kevin Doyle is a director of a company called HBW down in Florida, or I think it practices right throughout the states. So good morning, Kevin.
Good morning, Tina. Thanks for having me today.
Look, I'm really pleased to have you here, and it came on the suggestion of David Farrer, who I suspect you would have had a lot to do with when you were working here for the national government.
Most definitely. I know at the time when I was there, National was in opposition that were moving towards getting back into government. But, David is a great friend and a great asset to all those in politics in New Zealand, for sure.
Yes, he is, and a personal friend of mine too. So there you go. Any friend of David's is a friend of mine, as they say, and is what I think what you
Exactly.
said as well. So, Kevin, just give us a little bit of your background, just so people know exactly where you've come from and your experiences in the political arena.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me today. But I am currently, like you said, work for a firm called HBW Resources out of Texas, but we have offices throughout the United States, and I'm based in the great state of Florida. My background, I'd worked in Washington, D.C. for a good number of years, starting out at the Republican National Headquarters at the RNC, but also worked in Capitol Hill for a couple of U.S. senators, and also worked for the Bush administration as his deputy director of the Workforce Office at the White House when he started his term in 2001. Had an opportunity, a couple of years, it feels like yesterday, but I guess almost 20 years ago, but come to New Zealand for a year and do some work with the National Party, and it was a great experience. I got to do a lot of great things in New Zealand. But as you know, once you get in this field, you kind of stay in the field for a while, and still have lots of friends who work in the party process and politics and campaigns, and of course in both campaigns right now here in the United States. And of course, interesting things happening here for sure.
It was. I was so delighted to get you to come on board today, and then boom, it happened. I must admit, last week my social media boards filled up with Biden won't make it past the weekend. And I announced to a meeting I was at last week, Biden's gone. And everyone went, oh, no, he's not. Not yet anyway. And I went, yeah, no, he will be. And so as a pundit, I've just managed to increase my points. But were you really expecting it so fast?
I wasn't. I thought he would definitely, and there was a lot of us here who thought he would kind of tough it out and stay the course, because the convention, the Democrat Party, is only, a few weeks away. And the delegates are all locked in; they're all Biden-Harris delegates. So he kind of had the ability to persuade the outcome there. But again, as you know, in politics, when you're losing the news cycle every single day for weeks on end, at some point you have to change the news. And having a daily drip of Democrat officials asking for your resignation or to drop out every single day for 3 weeks straight, definitely not a great way to have a campaign going.
No, it's not. And in the last few hours, we've seen a lot of suggestions as to who the Democratic nomination will be for. And Kamala Harris has been anointed by Biden. But are you seeing that as an absolute, as a given, that she will end up with the top spot?
My betting money is that she probably will. However, as you've noticed, we're in uncharted territory here in America. We've never seen this happen in modern politics in the U.S., where you've had a candidate that's had the nomination literally dropping out days before before securing the nomination at his party convention, and literally a few months before the election's supposed to happen. And ballots are already being printed out. Absentee ballots for overseas voters are going to be mailed out shortly. So this is happening pretty quick. So I wouldn't put it past anything amongst the Democrat Party what they're going to be doing in the next few weeks. I know, there's a lot of talks about having an open convention where they kind of duke it out on the floor and try to figure out a candidate right now. But right now, I think the vice president definitely is is definitely in a good position to secure that spot moving forward. But again, anything could happen.
And who is likely to be a challenger? Because we're hearing Michelle Obama, Hillary Clinton. This is a sort of like the New Zealand echoes, I suppose. By the time it gets to here, these are the noises that we're hearing. How realistic are those? And where does Kennedy fit in the picture?
Yeah, no, you're hearing it. The great thing about I think the world's gotten smaller, so with thanks to the internet and things like that, you're able to kind of see things real time around the world. So I think you're spot on. It's interesting because a lot of folks were saying, that the Clintons were going to be behind some of this, trying to get Hillary perhaps another shot at things, but they came out immediately and endorsed the vice president. Yeah. However, the Obamas came out asking for an open convention to have open primaries and a process to find somebody new. So that definitely is an interesting development. However, some of the top governors on the Democrat side that were mentioned as potential challengers, like Governor Newsom of California, Governor Shapiro of Pennsylvania, and a couple others have all came out and said no, they support the vice president. So you definitely, but it's also curious too. There's some folks that have been quiet. The governor of Kentucky has not said anything. The governor of North Carolina has not said anything. And they're both candidates that have been talked about as perhaps someone to come challenge. But it's anybody's guess right now. But a lot of folks have come out in support of the vice president.
And so, what about Kennedy? Where does he fit in the picture?
It's interesting. He did do a press conference earlier today talking about his place in this, and in the polling, he hasn't made it yet in some of the states' ballots. So his polling has kind of been a little bit not the best. He had the potential to get some double digits across the board, and it was still kind of undetermined whether or not it was going to hurt President Biden or President Trump, where his support came from. But he's still getting anywhere from 5 to 15% in a lot of the national polls. So if he gets on the ballot, he could definitely be someone that could disrupt, kind of traditional polls moving forward. I know, our friend David Farah, who's involved in the polling business, having wild cards like that always make for interesting polling samples. But Kennedy could still have a factor in this because I think depending on what happens with the vice president, folks could be, definitely disenfranchised if you're a Democrat voter, and all of a sudden the folks for the ticket that you supported gets pulled off its convention and selected by party insiders. You might have folks that want to look for other options.
And in terms of Kennedy, there was some talk of him joining either one of the other parties, and for the life of me, I couldn't remember where I'd seen it or which party it was, that Kennedy had been asked to join. Is there any chance of that at all, or is that just someone flying kites out on the internet?
I think it's probably more some kites on the internet, perhaps, as you have said, but anything could happen. I know he has talked to folks on both parties because at the end of the day, it makes it a cleaner campaign if you're able just to go up against one or the other. We saw in the past where Ross Perot jumping in the race with Bush and Clinton, how that kind of up to the dynamic of that race. So a third party with some credibility and some support in the polls definitely can hurt that to one-on-one matchup. So it'll be interesting to see, but I wouldn't be surprised if we continue to see some courtship from both sides to Kennedy moving forward.
Yeah. And, of course, like after the events of last week, it seems to be like these days politics is by the hour, by the minute. But last week when we had the assassination attempt on Trump, I think it was last week, it was an extraordinary sort of a response from Republicans and actually Americans who had not really decided which way they were going to go and changed as a result of that event. Are we seeing that correctly?
I think you're right. I think there definitely, some of the first polls are starting to come out, post the attempt and post the Republican convention, which just concluded on Thursday. And you're continuing to see a upward trajectory of President Trump in the polls. Some of these battleground states, that, he has to win to get into the White House again, like, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Arizona, and others. He's starting to become outside of the margin of error, which I think was also one of the big deciding factors on the Democrat side to continue to push so hard to try to get President Biden off the ballot, because the polls were moving in that direction. So the convention, by all, talking to all folks, came across as a very successful convention, very great messaging. The President Trump came out and I think was very reflective of what had happened the last 7 days. And I think a lot of folks were saying he was, somewhat of a changed man in many ways, the way his demeanor was during the week. We'll see how that continues to, moving forward, especially with this, change on the top of the Democrat side. But I think you're definitely right, though. There was definitely, after the assassination attempt, the Democrats couldn't continue to have this continuous drib in the news of every day 5 new Democrat members of Congress coming out against Biden to stay in the race.